Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone feeling this afternoon? Yeah? What'd you think about the keynote, the general session? Thumbs up? All right. Excellent. Although I work for VMware, I've been on board for 12 years, I still get excited every time I see a general session. And my background is formerly technical, but even in this role and capacity, I still find the same enjoyment. That's who VMware is from a company perspective. We're an innovation house, if you haven't already caught the memo on that. And then speaking of innovation, we've got an esteemed panel with us today, representing AT&T and VMware as well, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Mo
Katibeh.
Uh-oh. There we go.
Katibeh, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at AT&T Business. The product organizations that develop the products that we bring to our 3 million business customers, our channel digital distribution teams, and our marketing communications team are part of my team.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Shekar, Ayyar. I run our corporate development as well as our telecom vertical at VMware, and super excited to be here, particularly in light of all the great work we're doing with AT&T and carriers globally.
Hi, I'm Sanjay Uppal. I'm not so esteemed, but I run the software-defined WAN business at VMware. I used to be the CEO of VeloCloud, and a strong, close partner of AT&T.
Excellent. And so most of you have probably read the heading here, but the intent is to really talk about the joint partnership and innovation that VMware and AT&T have been able to accomplish together. And so that's the genesis of today. And if we jump in, well, if I tell you a little bit about the format, what we'll find very quickly is that my style is very loose. A lot of the sessions that you've attended have been unilateral, right? So you've got one person talking to you and you listen. This session is going to be a little bit more informal. It'll have some structure in the sense that I've got a list of questions that I'm going to ask our esteemed panel. But then hopefully at the end, if there's additional time, we'll open the floor for all of you to ask questions as well. Sound good? Sound good? Yeah. There we go. All right. Here's the first question. Mo. Mo, as you're an active LinkedIn user, you're constantly writing about driving change and how to become a strong leader. And you're leading change within the culture of AT&T Business. Can you share your philosophy on internal business change and the culture itself?
Absolutely. So, first let me say, I really enjoy LinkedIn, both as a social platform, but also as kind of a learning platform. Literally every single day, whether it's new technologies, whether it's new thought leadership, whether it's just what's happening in the industry and the adjacent industries, using it like a news source has really taught me a lot over the last year. And so I've kind of leaned in and been trying to do 1 to 2 articles a month myself as well. And really, at the core of it is that the culture that any of us have in our organizations is what drives innovation or doesn't drive innovation. And so one of the things that we did inside of AT&T Business about a year ago is we really looked at our product organizations, and we had our products spread across 3 different officer groups, if you will. And we realized very quickly that was not driving the intent that we wanted. It wasn't driving the culture we wanted. It wasn't driving the innovation we wanted. And we collapsed all of our product groups under one chief product officer. And very quickly we saw that as part of doing that, it helped flatten the organization. It helped us start thinking about the solutions that our customers were looking for versus each product group trying to bring their product to market. We started putting things together to drive edge-to-edge solutions for our business customers by vertical. It empowered the people at every level of the organization to make decisions. And then meetings stopped being about, hey, let's decide. It was, hey, I'm doing X. Here's the outcome that we're driving as part of that. Here's the A/B testing that we've done, and here's what's working, here's what's not, and then we talk a little bit about strategy and go about our business. So I really do think that from an internal culture perspective, it was one of the best things we've ever done. Really seeing some incredible innovation at every single level of the organization since we've done that, and we've coupled it now with really lifelong learning. So we've opened it up where anyone in the organization can learn about any other part of the group. We don't dictate that anyone take any sort of training. or education, but we make it available for them. And then as people are going through and learning about new products, new solutions, other parts of the business, that information then shows up as they're looking for new jobs and bidding on those new jobs. So you know this is someone who's really trying to make a career change, they're interested in this, and again, further drives that innovation cycle.
Well, that's excellent. And then, you know, a lot of times we hear about how culture drives innovation. And you mentioned that just a minute ago, the edge-to-edge solution. Can you spend a little bit of time talking about the edge-to-edge strategy at AT&T, and then maybe even some of the challenges that it addresses from a enterprise customer perspective?
Absolutely. And it was really interesting for me to sit through the keynote this morning because it really resonated with what we're doing at AT&T as well when you think about edge-to-edge. So at its heart, AT&T has been around for about 142 years. And connectivity, core connectivity, the network has been what we have brought to the business community for a very long time. And a few years ago, we went through our own digital transformation where we shifted away from being a hardware-centric company in terms of how we were approaching our own network build to being a software-centric company. And we realized that we were able to take this architecture that we were creating for ourselves and really create entirely new business solutions on behalf of our enterprise customers. And the timing of it was perfect because frankly, one of my favorite parts of my job is I get to sit down with a lot of customers, and the one question I always ask them is, hey, what's your big project for the year? What are you working on? And more CIOs are fully embracing this digital transformation, this cloud transformation, which is really just, you know, a fancy way of saying, how are we using software? How are we using the cloud? How are we using applications in order to drive new revenue, take out costs, and create new experiences for our customers that blur together the physical and the digital? And realizing this, and this new architecture and software capabilities we had, we understood, hey, look, we can go past core connectivity. We can move into the LAN and how that LAN transforms and intersects with that WAN, whether that's routing, whether that's firewalls, whether that's Wi-Fi, whether that's IoT or mobile endpoints, coupled with that core connectivity, wireless, wireline, and hybrid, really now being driven in part by our SD-WAN solutions that we've brought to market together. And all of the data off of all of those things is having to go somewhere. The public cloud, the private cloud, hybrid. We can serve our customers in all of these domains, core connectivity, the LAN, into the cloud, all wrapped in security. And that is what we mean by edge to edge, and it really dovetails quite nicely.
I mean, just to add to that, Mo, we kind of see ourselves all coming together in very interesting and fortuitous ways. We, at VMware, we've looked at this as an abstraction software layer that takes resource pools and makes it available in this cloud form, which is essentially very self-service determined, and you kind of get to determine how much of what capacity you want. And we started looking at that from private data centers. And then now increasingly we're working more and more in closer collaboration with communication service providers, telecom carriers, because we're all coming to the same conclusion that enterprises and customers want to have a lot more agility, a lot more say in sort of what they want, when they want it, and they're just overall getting impatient, right? And so I think we fundamentally, vision-wise, we're so aligned that we think that the next 5 years have great things coming for our combined enterprise customers. So.
That's a great point, Shekar. And then, so following up on that, when I think of VMware, obviously we're no stranger to innovation as well, right? You talked a little bit about the strategy of VMware, how or more so our perception of the industry. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the strategy of VMware? I know that one of the many hats that you wear is a GM of the telco business unit.
Yeah.
Can you give some context there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll talk more overall strategy from a VMware standpoint, and then come and focus on the telco vertical as well. I mean, in fact, I was talking to the industry analysts a little earlier. There are parts of VMware that I would say are very cutting edge, next gen, and we're constantly innovating. So we sort of unveiled in Pat's keynote a whole set of innovative things, including how we're virtualizing the ARM architecture, how we're using NVIDIA GPUs for better ML capabilities, how we're bringing RDS capabilities into the enterprise. So these are all things that I would call as very forward-looking. But in the other way, somewhat in a very consistent format, our strategy hasn't actually changed, because we started out being an abstraction software company that basically said you could do things more efficiently with a layer of software that abstracts on top of existing infrastructure underneath and can create pools of capacity that people can use for applications on top. And so if you think about everything we've done, that has not changed at all. I mean, it's taken different kind of forms. We've gone into different domains. We focused very much on, I mean, in fact, the genesis of the company 20 years back was very workstation-centric and workstation virtualization-centric. From there on, we expanded out to servers, to then data centers, then went from server to compute to network to storage, and then management and security. So if you think about that expansion, it has taken our scope to become much more what we called SDDC, as a software-defined data center. But increasingly, as you can see, it is really solving one fundamental problem, which is how can software make it more efficient to run applications on top of underlying infrastructure. So it's just fascinating that there are elements of our strategy that have just remained consistent even as we have looked at all these domains to service. And then if I bring the spotlight on telco, and again, thanks to our acquisition of VeloCloud for our increasing partnership with AT&T, as we look at our ability to service carriers worldwide, we see a tremendous opportunity for carriers to go virtualize their infrastructure and in a way become 5G ready even before all the 5G protocols are determined, because a lot of the scaffolding that you put around that using virtualized infrastructure remains consistent, frankly, whether you're delivering voice over LTE on a 4G network or whether you're going to translate that VNF into a 5G VNF. So we think that this vertical, this industry, has tremendous potential to service the enterprise customers, and frankly, even on the consumer side, using a virtualized architecture just allows carriers to deploy services much quicker. So that's fascinating for us.
Oh, absolutely. And then, you know, Mo and I spent a lot of time today talking about branding, the branding of AT&T. We talked about the branding of VMware. There were meetings with Robin Matlock, who's our CMO. When you think about the branding of VMware and the perception of who VMware is, our identity, we've got multiple faces. From a telco perspective, can you talk about the face of VMware from a telco perspective and how we've matured?
It's right here.
Actually, it's right here. But I think, first of all, I'd say the way I look at telco, just making the problem a little simpler from a partner and a vendor standpoint, is I see three centers of excitement in a telco that we engage with. One is IT, and that's been a historical sort of mainstay for us at VMware. We've always sold to the CIO, the VP of IT, the data center operator inside a telco, much like we do any other enterprise. It's been somewhat of an undifferentiated sales approach. Then I see two very interesting personalities. One is Mo, and so this is the business services owner within all telcos. And the job is to take a P&L and just dramatically grow it with all the services that the telco can offer the enterprise. And so we see an increasing awareness, and we would love for that to multiply a lot more in terms of recognizing VMware, I mean, not just organically, but through the help of companies like VeloCloud that we're bringing into our fold. And then the third is really the CTO and the core network owner of the telecom carrier. So this is frankly for us the hardest to break into, but it's also the holy grail for us, where if we get engaged at that level, it becomes a very tight and strategic connection. And so we are increasingly starting to work with carriers globally to make sure that they recognize that VMware software can actually be a great accelerant for them to deploy services on top of their network. And as Mo has described, several SD-WAN functions can be delivered either from the cloud, it can be delivered from the network. So there are many form factors of these things that we are engaged with. But those are the three personalities that we would love to get our brand much better recognized. But it's sort of proceeding in that order, I'd say. IT recognizes us every day. I think the business services person is starting to recognize us. And then network, we're just starting to make inroads I'd say we are early in scratching the surface there, but there's a lot of opportunity for us there.
Excellent. And then Sanjay, I can't leave you off the hook. Mo talked about the business culture and how business culture drives innovation. And Shekar spoke to the perception of VMware and his perception of the industry and how the telco BU has matured. From your perspective, being somewhat the new kid on the block in the family of VMware, what are your thoughts on the business culture at VMware? That's not a career limiting move.
Right. So, when we started this journey about 5 years ago, one thing became very obvious, which was we're taking infrastructure from the premises of an enterprise and moving it into the network and running that as a service. So whenever we look at running something as a service, things happen at an accelerated pace because you don't have the ability to go and touch various points in the network. And so speed and sense of urgency is something that drove the VeloCloud culture. And I just used 2 words to describe the culture. It was learn fast. The faster that my team learned, the more distance that they put between us and all the other competition, because competition started at about the same time we did. There were 2 other competitors that started at the same time, and then there's many more that have come up. But our ability to learn fast, I think, put us in a position where we got folks like, AT&T, Mo and his team, many of whom are here in the audience, interested, and then Shekar and his team got interested in what we're doing as well. Now, coming into VMware, which is, part of the question, I think one of the things that both of us looked at, and, Shekar and I were in conversations about this acquisition, was the culture side. What is it on the VMware culture that would fit well or not with VeloCloud and vice versa? And it was remarkable that, when we looked at the software definition, even we were a software company really driving what we can do with a sense of urgency and speed, and that is where VMware was going as well. Now, we've been on campus for about 4 months, and that cultural integration has gone really well. We haven't really seen seams in the integration, and believe me, when companies get acquired, a lot of seams do show up. But in this case, it's actually gone very well, and I think part of it is because we are helped along with the partnership that we have with large companies, and AT&T being the foremost one that we were knocking on the doors on very early on. And I think it's to AT&T's credit to look at a small company like VeloCloud, who would look at a tiny company to entrust the next generation of wide area networking for software-defined WAN, and to look at this company as being part of that strategy. I think it's telling upon AT&T's vision of how they wanted to see this, virtualized infrastructure going through, as Shekar was pointing out, the product side, but also the network side. So I'm very pleased to be here. I mean, I couldn't even conceive. Last year I was here at VMworld. I could have never conceived that I'd be sitting on a stage here with Shekar and with Mo, discussing this topic with you.
Excellent. And then Shekar, going back to you, obviously VeloCloud is an impactful solution or part of a solution for AT&T. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that the VeloCloud acquisition has made to VMware, and then specifically for what we're doing from an NFV perspective?
Sure. Well, so first, I think as I mentioned, VeloCloud has brought to us a number of very interesting service provider conversations, and I think foremost among them is the partnership with AT&T. I think that it is exciting for us to have multiple points of engagement with these service providers, and SD-WAN happens to be one that is just kind of right time, right place for this combination of service provider, software provider, and the enterprise to all come together. So we put in a lot of thought in terms of why this makes sense for us as VMware to go acquire a company like VeloCloud, but also in terms of what is the roadmap going forward and how are things, to the culture of innovation that Mo talked about earlier. There's a belief inside VMware as well that we would just not succeed if we don't constantly stay innovating, right? So what I'm excited about is taking this conversation and partnership forward in at least 2 dimensions. One is, what are all the services, for example, that an AT&T would like to deliver into something like SD-WAN as the footprint for that, and then how can we increasingly become more relevant to a provider like AT&T? And then at the back end as well, what kind of network transformations using technologies like NFV would make it easier and faster and better deployable for architectures, at least in some subset of these instances. And once again, how can VMware potentially play a role, right? So I don't think that we would have had, frankly, that kind of leverage as well as FaceTime with AT&T, if not for this acquisition. Right? So I'm actually quite thankful and appreciative of the fact that we're all sitting at this floor because of our move in terms of bringing VeloCloud into the family.
Excellent. And then this is a teaming question. This was for you, Mo, and also for you, Sanjay. For members of the audience, we talk quite a bit about SD-WAN. Sanjay, can you, maybe for the technical folks that might be in the audience, can you talk a little bit about the actual technology, maybe SD-WAN as a whole, and then what makes the VeloCloud solution unique? And then for you, Mo, how do those pieces of the equation fit into the engine of AT&T and what you're doing from a FlexWare perspective?
Very good.
Certainly. So I think SD-WAN very simply is taking what used to be a fairly complex wide area network for businesses and simplifying it through software. And simplifying it to the point where enterprises can get their edges of their network up and running within a day, when previously it used to take a lot longer than that. The complexity really came from very heavy software locked in custom proprietary boxes at every endpoint of an enterprise. If a business has 1 or 2 locations, it's not very difficult to get by. But if you have 5, 10, 15, 100, 1,000, 10,000, we're now looking at locations in tens of thousands, then it becomes really difficult to solve the problem. And so what SD-WAN does is it solves the problem of automation, and it does that at the application layer. So that's the distinguishing feature. Now, why our flavor of SD-WAN is very critical, and where this partnership really comes in with AT&T, is that one flavor of SD-WAN is you just make things simple on the enterprise part, and that's kind of an evolutionary step. But what we decided to do is take the complex, what's on the enterprise, and move it into the network and run that as a service. And when you look at running something from the network as a service, it has to be multi-tenanted. It's got to scale to the scale of what AT&T runs, and it's got to work with different administrative domains. It's got to cross different federated boundaries, and all of these things were different with the VeloCloud architecture. And that's the one, from the get-go, we started off by thinking that the service providers are going to be absolutely critical in the delivery of SD-WAN as a service. And that's how we too are different in terms of what we do versus other SD-WAN providers do. And that's the crux of it, multi-tenanted service run from the network.
What I'd add to that is, I think that was really well said. What is truly unique about what VeloCloud and AT&T have brought together is a lot of people, and when I read articles, they lump SD-WAN solutions as if it's one thing. Right? We have brought 2 flavors of SD-WAN to market. One is a pure over-the-top solution, which rides on top of that universal CPE at the edge that we call FlexWare as a virtual network function, and can be service chained with other things like routing, WAN acceleration, firewalls, etc. The second version is truly unique in the marketplace today, where when you start thinking about the complexities of really large enterprises that have hundreds, thousands, or 10,000 plus locations, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? This digital transformation, this cloud transformation is a journey that takes time. And a lot of customers want to do this migration, this evolution site by site. They may want to mix and match pure MPLS sites where that data needs the reliability, the security, the class of service that MPLS brings, coupled with other locations that might be pure SD-WAN, and they want to manage it as one holistic hybrid network. Arguably, what we have brought to market together is the only SD-WAN solution that does that and does it at scale. And frankly, we are seeing tremendous success with it. We have our own AT&T Business Summit that's coming up in a few weeks, and so we'll talk more about kind of the numbers at that point in time. But I couldn't be more pleased with what we're seeing. And then, when I start thinking about how enterprises are now actually driving outcomes with this technology, I would say the feature that we're seeing that's being most oft used is the ability to manage applications across multiple links and prioritize applications across multiple links. So whether it's dedicated internet and shared internet, or whatever two flavors of connectivity you bring. You take a financial institution as an example. A couple of months ago, we announced that we won Citizens Bank, 1,100 locations across the United States being fully transformed using SD-WAN with digital signage, with mobile devices for the employees, with voice, with AirWatch as the mobile device management, with cybersecurity, with cloud connectivity as one edge-to-edge solution. And what SD-WAN allows them to do is within each branch, they can prioritize their employees and the devices that they're using and the digital signage versus more of their internet offload traffic, training videos, or hey, I'm an employee and I'm going to go access some sort of social media or search for something. And then if one of the links ever goes down, they can prioritize their critical traffic on the link that's remaining. And they can dial up and down the traffic across those links based on time of day. If it's rush hour and I know I'm going to have a bunch of customers walking in, I can scale up the guest Wi-Fi to be able to handle that while dialing back my back office. So just as a technology, it really drives this digital and cloud transformation and helps our business customers with outcomes that matter to their business and what they want to accomplish for their end customers.
Oh, that's excellent. So, and piggybacking off of the outcomes, terms that we hear quite often are total cost of ownership, security, business agility. How has this marriage with VeloCloud and AT&T, how has that helped AT&T in achieving those three goals?
It's a great question. So, when you think about the legacy environment, if you will, every one of these branch locations or headquarter locations, dozens, hundreds, thousands, would have iron boxes. There'd be some sort of box for routing, some sort of box for WAN acceleration, a firewall, maybe some sort of device that was managing the Wi-Fi solutions. And what we've done with our FlexWare, universal CPE that sits at the edge, is allowed business customers to basically take all of these historic functions that not only did they have to pay for each one of these things separately, but then the space, the cooling, the operational management of it was a real cost as part of the total cost of ownership. And they've all become applications that, just like an application you download on your smartphone, these things now become applications that you can download on your FlexWare. And one of them, as we've talked about, is the VeloCloud SD-WAN VNF. And that we're seeing for our business customers absolutely the ability to optimize their cost, factoring in not just the connectivity, but all of the surround that would come with the operational management of these different solutions.
Awesome. All right, so this is a question for all three of you, independently or together if you so choose. When we talked about SD-WAN, we defined it. We talked about the unique value that together we bring in the AT&T VMware solution. Where do you see the vision of SD-WAN? What's the future look like? A lot of what we share at VMworld is around today, but also tomorrow. We talked about the virtual cloud network and the direction of VMware. But in your mind, Shekar, in your mind, Sanjay, where do you see the vision of SD-WAN going?
You want to kick us off?
Sure. I mean, I think from our perspective, I would say that getting the enterprise the best ability and access to all the resources that they want in a way in which it is almost independent to some extent where these things are coming from is the ultimate sort of nirvana goal. Today, I think we have very siloed environments. We have sort of what I would call as clouds residing within data centers for various reasons. We have clouds residing in hyperscale providers like Amazon. And then we have the traditional view of a network provider like an AT&T that provides only kind of connectivity services. And we think that this entire model is getting disrupted. Okay? And so for good, as in we think that the AT&Ts of the world should play a much bigger role in providing entire business services to the enterprise. we think that that should actually leverage the capacity of an Amazon and the capacity that exists on-prem. And that these are all now being made possible by the vision of taking these abstractions, connecting them, and taking them to the next generation architectures. So SD-WAN in some ways to me becomes a very good example of how to take some of these models and make it real. As an example, I think SD-WAN is a way in which AT&T can leverage software from VMware and possibly from others as well, but taking that and using that to deploy services in a secure and manageable way to enterprise customers, using a combination of their network and network resources, as well as what VeloCloud has done on the cloud. So that's sort of one example of how these things are coming together. So personally, I feel like the vision going forward is if we look at the enterprise as a customer that is going to be more and more exacting in terms of how quickly they want services, at what cost they want services, and how they want to deploy these applications on an infrastructure that is extremely agile, we think that we will all collaborate to bring that right answer to the enterprise. And I'm fascinated that SD-WAN is a great example of that. So.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think, we're right in the throes of signing up, literally thousands of customers right now with AT&T and with others. And so we're looking sometimes at the blocking and tackling what's happening. But if I take a step back and see where this thing is headed, a few years from now, I don't think we're going to say, well, where is SD-WAN headed? It will become the wide area network. It's going to become the default way that people are going to connect. And there's really two things that seem to be apparent that customers are looking at us for together. The first is that, and you've heard about it all in the keynote as well, the pendulum of compute is shifting back now from the cloud back into distributed compute going on at the edge. So how SD-WAN fits in with edge computing is going to be one thing that we're going to be resolving very quickly in the future. And this is again where VNFs and VMs and containers, because what's a VNF if not just a bundle of compute with some networking in it? Right. Not too different from what you do in a container or a VM running there in a branch office. In a branch office we've seen can be a traditional branch office, a retail store. It can be an oil rig. It can be a container ship. It can be a tractor out there in an agricultural field. So the definition of branch office is becoming, quite loose. But connecting all of that together with edge compute thrown in and managed from some central locations running in the network is one direction that this is going. I think the second one is all about the application. How can you control these applications and control from a positive standpoint of give more resiliency, as both Mo and Shekar were talking about, how do these applications run regardless of where they are. In fact, you won't even have to say where these applications are located. You should be able to get access to them with the right resiliency, and the network will have to adapt to get that. So edge compute and application control are the two areas that we are focusing on in terms of taking SD-WAN to the next generation.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. When the smartphone revolution launched about 11 years ago now, within that first 1 to 2 year period after, the sheer number of applications that were created that leveraged that cheap piece of compute that now everyone had access to hold in their hand fundamentally revolutionized how all of us live our lives. I mean, there was a point in time 12 years ago where I would still carry a camera, an alarm clock, a calculator whenever I go on business trips. And I don't think any of us can imagine a world where you don't have these capabilities at your fingertips. Edge compute is the next evolution of once you have the capability to have sub 10 millisecond round trip times to drive applications, it's going to create that next round of applications that some of which we imagine right now, and some the industry is just going to come up with and be like, look at all the cool things we can now do, that we have this distributed cloud in every metro within X miles of every end user, and SD-WAN will be a key part of that application-aware network that decides, using AI and ML, what workloads can go 80 to 150 milliseconds out to those that need to be processed within 5 to 10 milliseconds. And it's going to be an incredible next to 5 to 10 years. It's going to fundamentally change business, and I think as consumers, all of our individual lives.
Wow. That's cool stuff. Yeah. The moderator is impressed. So I would imagine that many of you out there attended the general session based on the noise and the raising of the hands. For many of you, you might be trying to digest or process the value of the virtual cloud network. And then based on what Mo has shared about the edge-to-edge strategy, you might be trying to figure out how these dots connect and or if they connect. And so I thought maybe a question for all of you, whoever wants to lead this one can, but where do you see the intersection between the virtual cloud network that we talked about this morning and AT&T's edge-to-edge solution?
Yeah, so maybe I can just kind of give a quick view and then Mo, you can dive in. Architecturally, I think the vision for connecting the entirety of what are network resources to bring them to the benefit of the enterprise, I think is completely aligned. I think where we will see probably implementations of these are that there will be real life situations that are customer driven that we'll all get into and start servicing, and then we'll find out what kind of tweaks we might have to make, or perhaps even AT&T on their side, to make it real for the customer. Because ultimately there's only one problem we're trying to solve, which is making it real for the customer and solving a real business problem. So SD-WAN to me is a classic example where, I mean, we could dream up any vision and likewise AT&T, but we're now in it together. We're servicing these very large enterprise customers with, I mean, as Sanjay and Mo were explaining, thousands and tens of thousands of locations, nodes, etc. And frankly, whatever we call our visions is great, but it's about making that real and operational. So I'm just fascinated that we're in there, we're working together to make it real. And I feel like over some period of time, we will be able to go in and say, here is the AT&T edge-to-edge vision, and here is how VMware has helped contribute to that and make whatever part or hopefully a good part of that real for the customers.
It's really well said. I don't have a lot to add to that. I would just say it's very complementary. Right? At the end of the day, when you think about the on-demand capabilities that we've introduced in terms of customers being able to spin up and down capacity to an individual location with SD-WAN capabilities that allow that application aware, now extending that into the cloud of your choice and with your self-driving data center.
The new SDDC.
Right? The new SDDC. It all really just gives the end enterprise customer significantly more control over their end-to-end environment.
Great. All right, so two more questions, and then we can open it up to the floor. So this would be to the VMware side of the house. VMware, Sanjay, Shekar, how would you describe AT&T as a partner?
Handsome.
That and actually let me let Sanjay talk and then I'll add, because he's had the greater experience working with AT&T as a partner. So
tastes great, less filling. So this is my second go around in partnering with AT&T. In recent years, in my last company as well, I partnered with the mobility side of AT&T. So I think, oftentimes, in fact, when I went to my investors and I said, this is going to be a service provider play and I want to partner with AT&T. And they didn't take to me very kindly, because usually what happens is if a startup goes and raises money on the basis of partnering with a large service provider, they feel that they're going to get stuck in the labs of the service provider and never see the light of day. But that didn't happen. We went in there and very quickly got an audience. And there was a meeting of the minds, primarily because of the vision was aligned, that we felt that virtualization of the cloud was going to be instrumental in why the network was headed, and the folks at AT&T thought the same way. In fact, I remember back to an event that happened. Sorry, I'll take a couple of minutes.
It's okay.
Here. It was the foundry that AT&T had in Hamilton Avenue in Palo Alto. And we went in there, and your labs folks were there, Andre Fusion and company. And this was October 2015, so we had barely come out with our product. There were only a handful of customers, but we were called in as one of a few startups, and the AT&T team said, we want to listen to what you folks think is going to happen in the future, which was, that's highly unexpected for somebody that large to come and ask us this. So I happened to ask Andre in the break, said, how did this come about? He said, well, actually, we went to some of the bigger box providers and we didn't get the answer that we wanted. And so we decided, let's go to the startup community and see, what's happening. And from that conversation onwards, we got an entry point into the lab and started a parallel conversation with the product group, and then got our first set of customers. And literally, as we were launching our service, we were working with AT&T at the same time. And so my appreciation of AT&T in terms of that, first of all, our understanding that this is a cloud-based network service provider service. People will do DIY as well, but that the service provider is going to be very critically involved. That appreciation for AT&T, looking at it and being open-minded about what a small startup was seeing. That's my view of AT&T. Now, of course, as Mo was describing just before this started, AT&T is a very expansive view of what's happening. They have media assets and the consumer assets and all of this. So we don't quite see that part of it, but as Shekar was saying, eventually this will become the network for everything. And for that, I think, very grateful for the relationship and really see to it that from both a vision standpoint and then an execution standpoint. I mean, we see eye to eye. I mean, we get in there and we are partners, and as partners, you'll work together, you'll argue, but when we leave the room, we're all aligned. And I think that's what I really appreciate about the relationship with AT&T.
The only thing I'll add is while Sanjay thinks that we bought the company for his good looks, we actually bought it because of their relationship with AT&T. So.
Drinks on you.
Anything else, Shekar?
No, I think it is, like I said, I think leading a telco vertical, it's always our aspiration to do a lot with a carrier like AT&T. And so, like I said, I think this is a very modest beginning for us in the big scheme of what we could be doing together. And so I'm looking forward to the next, 5 years as a road forward where we would like to multiply this kind of several-fold in our engagement with different parts of AT&T.
Excellent. And then Mo, I'll ask you the same question in reverse. Your thoughts on VMware as a partner?
Absolutely. I think you nailed it. I mean, it's just the flip side of that answer, which is, from the beginning, we understood VeloCloud's inspiration and vision of moving edge compute to the premise of the business. And for AT&T, we thought that this was an area that was ripe for disruption. I mentioned this a little bit ago, but we were sitting in a space where the routing market was one box, the firewall market was one box, the WAN accelerator. There was just a series of boxes. That's how we had built our network historically, and that's how we saw every single business customer had architected theirs. And this vision of being able to go in and launch a new service that could sit on a universal CPE was at the heart of why we knew we wanted to work together and really launch this next 5-10 year vision of software-defined networking, VNFs, being able to be used no matter where they sit in the network, the premise, the metro, the cloud, being able to orchestrate across all of that with one set of policies, being able to manage dozens, hundreds, thousands of locations seamlessly through one portal, and then being able to help our 3 million business customers really bring solutions that would help them navigate this digital and cloud transformation was at the heart of why we wanted to work together.
Excellent. All right. We've got a few minutes left. Feel free to, actually go step to the mic. Give your first name, your birth date, your favorite color.
And your credit card.
I have a few questions. I'll probably stop with first and then open up for others then. The first one is, how do you actually differentiate other service providers actually using VMware and still be able to compete? The same solution. I mean, VeloCloud probably is being used by other service providers as well, right? So how do you actually use VeloCloud different from other service providers and be able to be competitive?
Gotcha. I'd answer that in two ways. So one is as I mentioned a little bit ago, we built a truly unique SD-WAN VeloCloud solution that we call network-based SD-WAN that allows our customers to really try SD-WAN site by site without committing to an all or nothing and have it be fully integrated into their MPLS network. So when you think about the enterprise space, a significant portion of the enterprise market is MPLS. They want to keep using MPLS for specific applications and traffic, and they want to augment it with additional internet capacity for things like searching the internet, social, training videos, what have you. And that application-aware control of being able to move across links, being able to bring MPLS and SD-WAN together as one managed hybrid network is unique in the market today. The second way I'd answer that question is inherently as part of our edge-to-edge solutions that we bring to market, we are more than just connectivity and SD-WAN. A business customer can come to us and we will give them turnkey managed Wi-Fi, LAN services, routing, WAN connectivity, any flavor of hybrid connection you want, mobile, wireline, dedicated internet, Ethernet, MPLS, SD-WAN, cloud connectivity into every major cloud on the planet using both private and public connectivity, IoT solutions, and layered defense in depth cyber solutions. So whether they just want parts of that or all of that, instead of having to go to dozens of different point solutions providers, AT&T can manage the entire thing on their behalf.
Okay. And you're able to provide that because you have partnerships with other vendors in the space as well, the cloud monitoring for wireless or security. Is it because of the overall turnkey solution that you have built, or is it because of purely VeloCloud's fabric?
It's both. So at the end of the day, when you think across all of those domains, we like to think what we do is bring a best-of-breed solution to our customers. And one thing that I think it's really important to keep in mind is when you get into the enterprise space, for any provider, any of us, you have to be able to bring a solution to bear that is widely deployable, but also can be customized on a site-by-site basis. So our approach to this space with both SD-WAN as well as the larger set of solutions that make up our edge-to-edge solutions is best of breed. Does that make sense?
Sure.
As an example, while we want everyone to use our connectivity, our transport, the way we've built Flexware, with the way we've built IoT, the way we've built cyber, the way we've built Wi-Fi, it is fully transport agnostic. So our very first Flexware customer was in New Zealand, where we are not the ILEC, if you will, right? So we can bring it to bear with anyone else's transport if that's what a business customer is looking for us to do.
Okay. Yeah, I have a few other questions, but I'll step off.
I want to do one shameless plug. Anyone's more interested in SD-WAN, there's a book available at the bookstore. You get 20% off today and tomorrow. I have not written it, so I don't
What's
get
it called?
It's called SD-WAN, the Networking Blueprint for Businesses.
And it's not authored by Sanjay Uppal?
No.
Okay.
It's two of the members of my team.
Okay.
I'm going to take it home for my children. Here you go, son.
My name is Will Johnson, and favorite color, long walks on the beach, whatever you said. Yes. Could you talk a little bit? A lot of us have been landing networks at locations, hundreds or thousands of satellite locations for a long time. We're used to the boxes, stacked in threes and similar. Tell us a little bit about the customer premises equipment that's landing here. What is it? How many boxes? How does it work? And if we wanted to just kind of do the simple thing and get the one box in, where would we start with this?
You want me to take that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. So so if you're wanting to do a full-scale transition, then what we can do is support a Flexware universal CPE at each one of those branch locations, or whatever your locations happen to be. And we can service chain together the various VNF functions that I articulated a little bit ago, including VeloCloud's SD-WAN. If you're in an environment where you want to keep some of those legacy boxes for perhaps you've invested and they haven't fully depreciated, it's, you're looking 3 years from now, I want to move to universal CPE, but for now I want to keep what I have, then you can go with the network-based SD-WAN solution, which can use Flexware, but can also be architected with whatever traditional iron boxes that you might have on premise. And we're seeing both flavors of that being deployed right now, which is, again, one of the key reasons why I love what we've built. If you want to go fully over the top, you can. If you want network-based, we can do that as well. It's quite unique in the market today.
Anything you would add?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So in certain situations, you would have a multi-core x86 box on which you could run multi-VNFs. You could terminate your WAN connections in the box, And then for certain locations where, let's say it's a small convenience store and they want only the one function because they want to keep their existing functions on the boxes, then you just have SD-WAN as the service running on a small, what would look like a wireless router. In fact, I was showing on in the other room. It's just a little device, and it recognizes the applications and measures the quality of the WAN links, and that's all it does. And that's your CPE. So CPE can range from, as Mo was saying, the higher end, more virtualized, to the smaller end, more dedicated. But all of this is much more simplified than what CPEs used to be.
Excellent.
Let's chat later.
The gentleman with 10 questions. No. You have another question? Anyone else? Or you're more than welcome to ask another question. Yeah? Everyone funneled their questions to you?
I have a book full of questions. Right, so just going back to the myth of MPLS is going to be cannibalized by SD-WAN and all that, right? So I mean, it's still be a myth according to me, but how would you actually consider it? Because based on some researches, which is actually something that I have personally done, 2 last mile internet connections have never gone down, or in terms of latency or jitter or packet loss. It's very few probability that both internet connections are at the same time going down. So does it actually mean that MPLS is actually going to go away, especially with SD-WAN? If so, how would you actually think of it as from the perspective of AT&T?
What I would tell you is we absolutely see more customers than not using MPLS as part of SD-WAN and augmenting it with additional connectivity. At the end of the day, our vision is, and what we've invested in and we've brought to market is, if a customer wants dual shared internet, then we can absolutely support that with our over-the-top offer that I've been articulating. We're seeing more and more customers, as they're testing site by site, realize that you do not get the class of service capabilities that enterprise customers that have grown up understanding what MPLS can provide, they're simply not getting that. And so more and more of the customers that we're seeing are using it as part of this hybrid network, and or using shared internet technologies to augment internet offload for lower priority applications and traffic. It's that simple.
Okay. All right. One last question.
Absolutely.
Actually, we've got someone in the back there. Let's come back to you. It's coming back. Good.
Yeah, hi. I'm from Westcon. We're a VCPP aggregator. I was really interested in the transport agnostic comment that you made. Was part of that decision process to do with your wholesale channels? I don't know if you have wholesale channels, but was that a big part of your decision in terms of 2-tier MSPs who might be using your services with their customers?
It wasn't. So we're obviously quite a large wholesale provider in the United States. But when we thought about the comment that I made around FlexWare and universal CPE with VNFs would allow us to truly disrupt an entirely new space, part of that was global, meaning while we have been a global player for a long time, primarily the spaces that we played was MPLS and pro services, professional services. And by building all of our next generation solutions to be transport agnostic, while continuing to invest in deeper broadband and Ethernet aggregation points all over the world, we could fundamentally change the economics of being able to go in and compete for more multinational and regional businesses in other parts of the what we call most of the world, right outside the United States. So it wasn't so much the wholesale play as it was this understanding of with our global relationships, we can simply go out and negotiate with other carriers to bring their transports at ever improving economics for ourselves because of our Ethernet and broadband aggregation strategy to go deeper into those regions with these pure over-the-top solutions and become more and more of a global player over time.
I mean, Mo, I think to add to that, I would say even if you extend that analogy, we're also seeing use cases where people are starting to couple capacity from telcos with these kind of public clouds for extension into new geographies without making necessary capital investments, et cetera. So I think there's an interesting set of relationships, partnerships, et cetera, that are forming across providers, where it is not necessarily sort of one provider has to invest globally for all capacity to be able to be a universal service provider.
Thank you very much.
Great. Question in the back? Or the middle?
My name is Steve Mayfield. I got a question for you, Mo. With the changes that we've seen, the disruption that we've seen as we're driving more toward NFV, do you envision at a point where the traditional pricing model that has been out there for circuits, which has been typically by circuit by speed, is going to eventually evolve into a consumption model? And how will the carriers adapt to that, not only from a pricing but also from an operational perspective?
Very good question. We've deployed on-demand services, even for circuit capacity, about 2 years ago. So we've had that offer out in the market. Now, it initially starts within your in-franchise territories, if you will, because you own the infrastructure and have the capability to orchestrate the dialing up and down of that demand on behalf of a customer. So what we did is we launched a new service, single pane of glass. Customers can buy it, they can go in and they can dial up and down the demand that they want. A great example of that is a small company that specializes in third-party HR payroll benefits. So a lot of kind of national customers, mid-market customers may not have HR resources and payroll. They'll outsource that to a third-party company. This company was one of those. And what they needed was the ability to have less capacity, kind of 9 business days out of 10. And then every other Friday on payroll day, they needed a lot more capacity out of their location. They also used our cloud connectivity solution that we call NetBond that allowed them to do the same thing into their cloud SaaS environment, where we allowed them to simply burst above the capacity that they bought. And as long as they weren't doing it more than X% of the time per month, there was no incremental charge. And then if they went above it X% of the time of the month, then they pay a little bit more. And they loved it, right? So it fit extremely well within their business model of most of the time I need this much capacity, and then 5% or 10% of the time I need this much capacity, and through a single portal, both for their circuit to their locations as well as their virtual circuit into their cloud environment, they could manage those things dynamically in real time without having to call us, without it taking planning, days, truck roll, etc. So we've already adapted our pricing to that. Longer term, as you see more and more companies adapting open source standards like ONAP, where we'll be able to better manage each other's networks, then you're going to see those sorts of technologies and capabilities become more widespread.
I mean, it's a great question, because I think it actually does provide architecturally the flexibility for the carrier to experiment with all these models. And I think you'll see a lot of innovation in that as we go forward.
Do you feel like that is the future for the carriers? Is to go to a consumption model very similar to the way that the cloud providers do?
I think at the end of the day, the one truth is that everyone is using more capacity every single year. So the question then becomes, what is the minimum capacity you need at any given point in time? And by the way, with the cloud growth, with cloud transformation is coming network transformation, where you need significantly more network as you move your SaaS, your productivity suite into the cloud. You need more network. So whether it's full consumption or, hey, look, I need this much capacity at all times and I want to be able to boost over time, I think that there's absolutely businesses that are going to want to subscribe to that. That said, the one truth is we're not seeing a slowdown in the incremental amount of bandwidth that each business needs every single year.
What's that?
That's only going to increase your value too.
Yeah. 50 billion devices by 2026, right? We haven't even touched on IoT. It is, along with edge compute, I think the a truly transformational technology for both business customers as well as all of us in how we'll, in a B2B2C model, live our lives in the next 5 to 10 years. I got to tell the story real quick. I've got a 3-year-old daughter, and when my wife was pregnant about 4 years ago, I got a text one day. I was at work, and it just said this, and there was this link, and I was like, okay. So I clicked the link, and it was a connected onesie for a baby. And I called my wife, and I'm like, what's this business? And she's like, you're going to buy that for me. And I was like, why? And she said, okay, so what happens is the baby sleeps in the connected onesie, and every morning I'm going to get a status report on how many times the baby flipped over and the breathing patterns. I said, let me get this straight. Mankind has existed for at least hundreds of thousands of years, and we've lived without the connected onesie. But you must have the connected onesie. And she was like, damn straight. You're going to buy it for me? So I bought the connected onesie, and I was driving home, and I was like, IoT is going to fundamentally change the world. It's going to create use cases and wants that none of us ever knew we wanted. Like, I can see inside of my fridge when I'm at the grocery store trying to decide the next beer that you're going to buy for me. So it's incredible.
It's probably going to let kids before they are 1 to do in-app purchases. More
Exactly,
likely.
yeah.
Not only has he bought the connected onesie, but he's got to make the network for it.
I was instructed to buy the connected onesie as well.
Were you?
I've got a
It's
2 and a
incredible.
1-year-old. Yeah, it's amazing.
I mean, that technology started with the military to read biometrics of soldiers in the field, was adapted for sports athletes gameplay, and then was adapted for newborns because we will buy it.
Okay.
That's right.
It's cool stuff.
All right. Well, we've run out of time, so I definitely want to thank all 3 of you for your candor today. Audience, for your questions, especially the guy with 15. But, all of that being said, I appreciate your time today. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.